Marketing and Community Outreach for Pacific Media Expo, and thank you for coming to the Allegiance musical panel. So let me give you a really quick introduction of the folks who are up here. Let's start with Jay. So Allegiance is Jay Kuo's fourth musical. His composing career began at Stanford, where he wrote and produced Upwardly Mobile. Kuo's second musical, Insignificant Others, played in San Francisco and won a Bay Area Theater Critics Circle Award for Best Original Script. His third work, Worlds Apart, about star-crossed lovers in a cultural divide, performed both in San Francisco and in New York. In addition to composing, Kuo is a Broadway producer of Catch Me If You Can, American Idiot, and Slava Snowshoe. Our second panelist is Lorenzo Keone. He has been part of the producing team of numerous productions on and off Broadway, which includes Slava Snowshoe, which was Tony nominated, American Idiot, which was also Tony nominated, Ellie and Catch Me If You Can, which got a Tony nomination also. As a producer of Allegiance, Keone brings a fresh and creative perspective to the challenges of theater production, drawing from his experience as startup entrepreneur and social media and marketing expert. And of course, our third person on our table is Takei. I could read you his bio, but it's quite long. Yes. So, it's very long. He has a page for himself. Do you guys want me to read it? Yeah. Oh, you know? Okay. Yep. And of course, last but not least, we have Paul Nacoochee, who lent his voice to many popular video games. So, you know, gamers.
Like what game?
I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Including Cars 2, the video game, Tomb Raider 7, Call of Duty World at War. He was also the voice of Jan Fu in Dead or Alive Dimensions, and Mr. Nacoochee has numerous theater, TV, and movie credits, including The King and I, Miss Saigon, ER, The Young and the Restless, Saturday Night Live, The Great Race, and The Next Race. And he also does voices in anime as well. So let me go ahead and start asking some of the questions. Actually, this is for Mr. Takei. How does your own experience growing up in an internment camp affect your work in Allegiance?
It affects me in a very profound way. My life has been defined by the internment. I was 4 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and of course, too young to understand what that was all about. And I just turned 5 when, well, my parents, there was a lot of commotion in the house. My parents started packing, and the next morning they dressed me, and I was in the living room, and they were dressing my younger brother and baby sister. And I was looking out the living room window when I saw 2 soldiers come marching up our driveway. They had bayonets on their rifle, shining in the sunlight. They stomped up to our front door, banged on the door, and when my father answered, they ordered us out. And we picked up the luggage that we were allowed to carry, and we were put on a truck. And I saw a group of people milling around across the street from our house. I remembered that, and when I was a teenager, I asked my father, what was that all about? And he explained that they were vultures, as he put it. They were looters waiting for us to be taken away, and they looted our home once we drove away. That experience is seared in my memory. Although I was a 5-year-old child, I do remember that. And then from there we were taken to Santa Anita Racetrack, the horse stables of Santa Anita Racetrack. And we were told that we were going to sleep in a horse stall. For me, as a child, it was kind of exciting to sleep where the horses sleep. But as an adult, I had thought back on how my parents must have felt to leave our 2-bedroom home and to be crowded into a narrow, smelly horse stall. How degraded they must have felt, how humiliating. And that internment experience, as a child, the real time that I spent in the internment camp, for me was actually, to be very honest, a fun experience. You know, because children adjust amazingly to the most unnatural kind of situation. As long as you have 2 parents who love you and establish some kind of stability in the family. I do remember the barbed wire fence that confined us. I remember the sentry towers with the machine guns pointed at us. And I remember when I made the night runs from our barrack to the latrine, searchlights followed me. I remember going with my father to bathe in a mass shower. Those are memories I have, but they were part of the normality, the routine of being confined in those barbed wire camps. I also remember starting school. We were taken to a camp in the swamps of Arkansas, and we learned how to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I could see the barbed wire fence in the sentry tower right outside my schoolhouse window as I recited the words, "with liberty and justice for all." Those are my childhood memories, memories of an innocent child. But as I grew up and began to understand what it was all about, I started to talk with my father especially, but with other adults, and got a better understanding of what that experience was, how unconstitutional it was. In our system, when you're arrested, you have the right to know why you're being arrested. And then you have a right to know, to challenge those charges in a court of law. And then when you're found guilty of that, you're imprisoned. In our case, there were no charges, no trial, no due process, which is the pillar of our justice system. Simply because we happen to look like the people who bombed Pearl Harbor, we were incarcerated for the duration of the war. But my father didn't want us to grow up bitter about that experience, because he believed in the American democratic system. He told us that both the strength and the weakness of American democracy is in the fact that it's a true people's democracy. And it can be as great as a people can be, but it's also as fallible as people are. And when Pearl Harbor was bombed, the nation was swept up in war hysteria. And politicians picked up on that and began the campaign of get rid of the Japs. We were American citizens. My mother was born in Sacramento. My father was born in Japan, but he came to, his father brought him to San Francisco when he was a boy, and he was raised and educated as a San Franciscan. He felt very American. I was born here in Los Angeles, where my parents met. And so, you know, we're Americans, but it gave me an understanding of how important it is in our kind of democracy, which is dependent on good people, how important it is for us, as we fancy ourselves good people, to be actively engaged in the political process, to hold democracy's feet to the fire, and not let the hysteria of the times take over. And so the internment experience has shaped my life, and that's why I've been an activist throughout my life. I was involved in the civil rights movement. I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. I was involved in the campaign to get redress for the unconstitutional incarceration of Japanese Americans. And I'm gay, and I came out in 2005, and I've been active in the struggle to get equality for lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgender people. It's a part of what it means to be a responsible American citizen. I've been active in political campaigns for politicians as well as for issues. So the internment has shaped who I am.
Thank you. And the next question is for Jay and Lorenzo. How did the idea of doing a musical set during the internment originate?
It's actually a really fun story. Lorenzo and I are producing and writing partners, and for about 6 months I've been looking for the story, the great story that would get us inspired and want to work hard on our next show. And on our very first scouting trip to New York, we were sitting in a theater, an off-Broadway theater, and I hear two people talking behind me, and one of them is talking like this.
I'm paying attention.
He's paying attention.
I'm paying attention.
So I turn around because I recognize the voice, and I
You stop.
I stopped in mid-sentence, and
Something must have happened for Jay to stop talking. So I turn around, and it was like, wait, George Takei?
so we met George in an off-Broadway theater, and we just exchanged niceties and talked about some theater, and sort of left it at that. We had some mutual friends, and it was fun running into him. But the next day, Lorenzo and I were at another theater, watching In the Heights. And who should be in our row but George Takei?
At which the first comment George had was, are you guys stalking us?
So it was surprising to us to see George and Brad again 2 days in a row. George was my hero growing up. You know, I was a big Star Trek fan, and he was the only Asian guy on TV. So I looked up to him tremendously, and I thought it was really great to run into him twice. Well, during In the Heights, there's this song that's sung by the father called Inútil. He's singing. He's a Cubano, and he's singing about his daughter and how useless he feels to help Puerto Rican. How useless he feels to help her in her path. And George was very affected and very moved by that song, and he was wiping away tears. And so I asked him at an intermission. I said, "Mr. Takei," because I called him Mr. Takei back then. And I said, "Mr. Takei, I'm so curious. Why did that song move you so?" And he began to tell us the story of growing up in the internment camps and how his own father felt helpless to help their family.
All of this at intermission, there was like a little crowd all around George listening for what you had to say.
And I kept looking at Lorenzo.
And we were like, you're thinking what I'm thinking, right?
Right, so we said, this is going to sound crazy, but I write musical theater and we're producing musical theater, and we think that the story that you just told would be a terrific inspiration for the next show that we want to work on. So we're going to send you a storyline and a title song. And
no, I can't say, I can't imagine what Brad and George must have thought at that time. It was like, who are these two people? And sure, whatever. But they, for whatever reason, trusted us enough to give us their email address. And we were on a trip. We actually spent the rest of the couple next weeks sort of like reading, and we read George's autobiography, and we started reading all this stuff. And a few weeks later, we did send George the title song, a title, and kind of an idea of a sketch of what we wanted to do, and said, well, you don't really know us, but we are going to work on this, and we think you should be involved. And somehow he said yes.
And so with George signed on, a few months later, we signed Lea Salonga to the project. And if you don't know Lea Salonga, she was the original Miss Saigon on Broadway. She's also the voice of Mulan in the
She was the one who sang the original A Whole New World.
Yeah, and also she's the voice of Jasmine in Aladdin. So she's known for her Disney work, but she's got one of the best voices on the planet. So these two superstar Asian Americans are